Can Christians really talk to God?
Oh, I know this one. No.
Shut up. They always say things like, God spoke to me, or God showed me the way.
And to those of us who don't subscribe to the Christian religion, you might immediately think,
Yeah, they're delusional.
But I propose that instead of making judgments, let's actually try to understand what might be going on here. And the way we can do that is through a bit of a cognitive reframe.
First of all, is the Bible wrong?
Oh, I know this one. Yes.
Well, I'm not actually sure about that. Maybe if you take everything literally.
Well, that was obviously not my intention.
What? You didn't write it.
Didn't I?
Shut up.
No matter what part of the world you search through, every culture has some sort of belief in the supernatural. So you might ask, why is religion and mythology so ingrained in humanity? Well, it's simple. The intensity of our consciousness compels us to ask questions about reality. So we ask questions and we ask questions, and the more questions we ask, the closer we get to an answer, and then the more we realize there is no answer. But it doesn't make sense. There has to be an answer. We have to balance the equation. And that's exactly what we do. It goes something like this. Number 1, we observe. Number 2, we ponder. Number 3, we realize the impossibility of this thing we call reality. Number 4, the happy accident explanation becomes increasingly unfeasible. Number 5, we acknowledge the unknown variable to balance the equation.
Science can explain how the Big Bang happened, but it can't explain why it happened. It can't explain why it started how it started, and it can't explain why it is how it is. These are questions for religion and philosophy. I'm proposing that the Bible is simply a series of stories written by many generations of thinkers trying to verbalize the unexplainable, the unknown variable. So to me, it makes sense that many degrees of separation from the original intent of the authors has led to a lot of flawed interpretations and misunderstanding.
Okay. What's your point?
Man, shut up, I'm getting there. Basically, in the question of is the Bible wrong, I want to get you down from a yes to like a maybe.
Well, you failed. That was aggressive.
Oh, right, you're in my head.
Try an imaginary gun next time.
So maybe the Bible isn't just fairy tales and mumbo jumbo. Maybe it's philosophers trying to make sense of reality. But over time, we've rationalized a lot of these whimsical theories with science. Like how lightning isn't actually Zeus 360 no-scoping ingrates.
I will tolerate your insolence no more!
God, baby, the blood of all the monsters missed you! Holy bloody mother of God, Jesus fuck!
It's just a scientific phenomenon that happens when,
Don't even try.
crystals and static or something. My point is that maybe there's an actual scientific phenomenon that can account for this thing that we call speaking to God. So let's zero in on what that might actually be.
That being said, let's talk about split brain experiments.
Real quick, if you don't know, your brain is made up of 2 symmetrical hemispheres. So what happens when you sever the connection in your brain between the 2 hemispheres? Some people have actually had a procedure done to split the 2 hemispheres of their brain. It's to treat epilepsy and prevent serious seizures. And you would think that this would irreparably cripple you, but that's not actually the case. There are no obvious signs of disability in people with split brains. However, there are some kinks. The kind of kinks that help us discover a deeper understanding of ourselves.
Kinks have helped me discover myself too.
Dude, what?
What?
We discovered that the brain essentially acts as 2 unique individuals when separated.
While selecting their morning outfit with right hand, left might come along to disagree. Actually, left hand might quite often disagree, which these split-brain patients found frustrating.
Left side can process and memorize language, while the right side engages in a more intuitive processing of reality. It's not quite this simple, but it's useful to think of the left as the logical, linguistic processor and the right as the intuitive, nonverbal processor. An interesting study was done on split-brain subjects to evaluate each side's capacity to make moral judgments. The right side seems to evaluate the situation based on intention, while the left side evaluates based on the outcome. For example, if an officer killed someone to protect someone else, the left brain would deem the officer morally guilty, while the right brain would deem them morally innocent. Another phenomenon that might shed light on the difference between the 2 hemispheres is psychopathy. So there's a lot of factors that lead to a psychopathic brain, one of which is a dominant left hemisphere and a weak right hemisphere. Psychopaths are logical, they're cold, they're calculated, often charming as a result of their linguistic ability, impulsive, manipulative, unemotional, unempathetic, and do not feel guilt. Essentially, this is what we need to know. The right brain is dominant in emotional processing, intuition, and big picture thinking, as in it takes more factors into account. The left brain is dominant in logic, language, and narrow or tunnel vision thinking, as in highly logical and precise but prone to blind spots, if that makes sense.
Now, allow me to posit a hypothetical. Say the dominant left brain suppresses the needs of the right brain for a long period of time. Now, considering that in split brain patients the two hemispheres appear to be two different people, you can imagine it's like two people fighting over control of the body. So if one is getting suppressed for a long period of time, the most probable human response in that situation would be to reach a breaking point and lash out. So the right brain would exert whatever control it has over conscious operation until conscious operation submits to its will. Given that we live in a highly logical, linguistic, and science-oriented society, it is easily conceivable that the needs of the right brain are suppressed over a preference for the left.
So this probably manifests into mental illness and ailment, anxiety, depression, rage, psychotic breaks, etc. This would mean that mental well-being is possible when there's a congruency between your actions and the needs of both your right and left brain. Think of how some marriages start because they fulfill some sort of logical need and end because they lack emotional fulfillment.
For example, a lot of people in my generation have divorced parents because they were expected to get married when they were young, not because they wanted to. Or people who spend their whole lives chasing a corporate position to only realize that it's completely emotionally unfulfilling and they can't handle it, and so they have a breakdown or a midlife crisis, and then they end up following their gut in the end and they go to a lower paying position that's lower stress and keeps them emotionally stable.
I mentioned that psychopathic brains are impulsive, which is a quality attributed to the left brain due to its tendency to have tunnel vision sort of thinking. Well, right brains are attributed the quality of holistic thinking, as in the big picture. So let's use this to circle back to the Bible. So when you think about it, what is a sin according to the Bible? In modern terms, sin is essentially when you give in to the short-sighted urges of your ego, as in short-term reward for long-term consequences. Whereas the opposite of sin, presumably virtue, would be short-term sacrifice for long-term reward. So you can kind of boil it down to this. One who listens to the right brain is essentially following the path of virtue. So if the idea of speaking to God could really be explained as a process of the brain, it would be explained as a communion with the right brain. We live in such a cold, logical, matter-of-fact world, but that's the world that we built for ourselves. A world that encourages the suppression of the right brain. So in order to be saved from a life of misery, we need to learn to discover the needs of the right brain and allow it to steer our lives just as much as the left brain does in order to find balance and thus peace. And I'll give you a personal example. I was hopelessly depressed for weeks, which is incredibly out of character for me. And I stopped to ask myself why. I remembered this concept that I was writing about, and I thought, what if I'm suppressing my right brain? So I stopped and asked, what do you need? What am I doing wrong? And rather than explicitly trying to figure it out with brute force logic, rather than seeking an answer, I kept my thoughts clear and I let the answer come to me. And the answer didn't come in the form of a verbal thought. It came with a feeling that I then associated with words, because I knew the answer before I put any words to it.
Because remember that the right brain is not a linguistic processor. It won't be able to come up with a verbal response. It's going to come up as a feeling, as an emotion. So to communicate with the right brain, you actually don't communicate. You feel.
Some people call this a gut feeling. Some people choose to call this intuition. Some people choose to call it instinct. And some people choose to call it God. And you know what? It really can feel like divine intervention. Use whatever word you want. Right brain, intuition, subconscious, God, the universe. It all means the same thing. We just attach our own preconceptions to each of them.
Should I start singing Kumbaya?
Dude, you're such a buzzkill.
I'm you fucking schizoid.
So, can Christians really talk to God? Well, yes, but what that sentence means depends on who you ask. If you mean, can Christians talk to the alpha male poltergeist? Then no, probably.
First of all, I'm the alpha male poltergeist.
Think back to balancing the equation. We observe, we ponder, we realize the impossibility of this thing we call reality. The happy accident explanation becomes increasingly unfeasible, and then we acknowledge the unknown variable to balance the equation. We didn't have a word for subconscious. We didn't have a word for right brain. We didn't have neuroscience. All they knew is that they observed a particular phenomenon when they were lost. If they closed their eyes, meditated, and sought out guidance, a crazy thing happens. They would find it. All they had to do is look within, and that's why they say God is within us all.
Yup, and if you still don't agree, go eat a fistful of mushrooms and get back to me.
Okay, that is neither professional advice, nor medical advice, nor financial advice.
Yeah, because it's life advice.
Dude! Anyway, that's just some food for thought. Like, subscribe, comment, discuss. Love you.